Hello, welcome to Writing Learning Objectives for AASECT. This is a really brief video to talk about how to write your learning objectives in a way that will make it easier for your proposal to be accepted. So the first thing we want to do is talk about goals versus objectives because people sometimes confuse the two. Goals can be broader, more conceptual, less specific, kind of intangible, but objectives have to be specific, narrow, tangible, measurable, and describe what participants will be able to do. So we'll go over this really quickly. Some of you have heard of SMART goals. SMART stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Sometimes achievable is turned into actionable, but the idea is that you're going to be able to see what someone can do. So the first thing is talking about specific. We want to really make sure that the goal is quite specific, particularly with the learning objectives. We want to make sure they're measurable. We want to make sure that there's some action we can see, that it's relevant to the discussion at hand. One of the funny things about this is that people often write goals that really don't have much to do with their presentation, and then they wonder why their evaluations are poor. The next thing is we want to see how and when people will be able to do these things. They'll be able to achieve the things that you want for them. Language for goals can be a little more abstract, so it can be things like explore, or discern, or identify. When it comes to learning objectives, which is what you're being asked to write for AASECT, they're going to be very, very specific. So let's look at some poorly written goals. Students will understand sensate focus. So this is not well written because it's really vague. We really just don't know what understand means. It's hard to measure understand. We don't know what they're understanding about it. So we want to it's not specific enough. Something like students will gain insight into PLICIT, the pleasure principle, and examine their own counseling styles. Sounds good, but there's just too much in it. There's really 3 objectives in that one piece. Another thing might be participants will discuss goal writing and its relevance to workshop creation. Well, that's an objective. It's a way to get to a goal. And the last is educate 90 students about STIs. We see goals like this, but the problem is it doesn't describe what the participants will be able to do or what they're going to learn. It's just you standing up there teaching. That's not a goal. You standing up there teaching something isn't the goal. The goal is to get folks to engage with the material somehow to learn from it, somehow to have some change take place as a result of your training. So the learning objectives is really where the rubber meets the road, because this is where you're going to really describe what people are going to be able to do when they're done. So an objective is a way to meet the goal. If you think about the goal as more your overarching goal for your training, an objective is how you're going to get people there. Your objectives are what the student does or the participant does, not what you do. So you can't write in there, show a video on blah, blah, blah. That doesn't tell us what the participant will be able to do when they go. Objectives should be measurable. You should be able to show what people will be able to do as a result of your training. And the easiest way to think about this is if you were to give people a post test at the end, would they be able to pass it? So for instance, if you say, students will learn about sensate focus. Well, that's really vague. We have no idea what you mean. But if you say something like, participants will be able to name 3 major components of sensate focus, that we can measure. We can even ask them on a test at the end, what are the 3 major components of sensate focus? And if they can write that down, we know that we've reached our goal. AASECT requires at least 1 objective per hour of a workshop or training. So if your presentation is an hour, you need 1. I say between 1 and 3 is good. One of the things that we do, however, see is people putting far too many learning objectives into far too short of a time. If your training is an hour or 2, 10 objectives is really ambitious to the point where you're probably not going to get to it. When we look at language, this is another thing that we see people leave out all the time when we're reviewing these applications, the proposals. People don't put in, by the conclusion of this workshop, participants will be able to, or by the end of this session, participants will be able to, or by the completion of this class. So whatever it is that you're doing, but particularly with respect to the AASECT conference, you have to have that language in there. Also, you may want to note that if you ever decide that you want to apply for AASECT CEs for something beyond your conference, or you want to apply for APA CEs or NASW CEs or AAMFT CEs or the like, you're going to find that they really do mandate the same kind of language for their trainings. And part of the reason for that is because we want to be able to see if people actually are meeting their goals. So we have a list of objective verbs that is actually in the proposal space on the website where you are in Event Rebels. When you're clicking in your proposal, there's going to be a PDF that you can click on, and it's going to give you all of the AASECT objective verbs that we accept. These are not just from AASECT. There are many organizations that narrow the acceptable verbs down just to make it easier for them to make it measurable, make sure that people aren't off track. These are just some of them. I went from A to D. The other thing you might want to think about is what level your objectives are in. So for instance, if you have a beginner's level training, then these are really good things to ask participants be able to do by the time you're done. Can participants identify something? Well, that's probably a beginning level thing. For instance, you might be able to get them to identify 3 major components of sensate focus. Can they recognize something? Can they list or name or categorize something? Can they define something? Those are really good beginner level objectives. So if you have a beginner level training, or you feel that people don't know much about your topic, and everyone in the room would be more of a beginner, then these might be some that you might want to think about. More advanced objectives would be things like analyze. Will the participants be able to analyze something? Will they be able to assess something? Now this is, when I look at the word assess, I think in a lot of times assess or evaluate. Those could be for educators or counselors or therapists, but I often think about them with respect to being able to assess a client or evaluate a client, right? Being able to assess a program might be an advanced objective verb for an educator. Critique, would somebody be able to critique somebody? Then it's going to be a more advanced training. What about debate? I mean, if you're going to put debate in there, you better include a lot in there that's going to allow people to be able to do that before they leave. I think it's a great verb and it's a great goal, but just making sure that we're at the place where our participants are. Train or teach, again, if you're saying that somebody's going to be able to walk out of there and teach what you put in there, that's definitely an advanced training. That's something that you would be preparing a lot of specific material for. And the last is transfer, and that could be transfer knowledge from one person to another or one person to a group. It could be transferring skills from one place to another, but those are a little bit more advanced objectives. This is the end. There's more to say about these types of things and about goals and objectives, but this is really just a basic to help you all put your learning objectives together in a way that is easy for AASECT to figure out what you're trying to do, and therefore easier for us to accept your proposal. Thank you for stopping by.